Who first wrought steel to thought, and who dared to make the flesh of gods tremble? Such questions linger across the void, whispered by the dead echoes of planets swallowed by the age of technology. The galaxy remembers the Titans, but one, the first, the only, stands apart, a relic of a time when mortals walked like gods and machines dreamed with minds of fire. On the dead worlds of Meneth Prime, shrouded in gravitic storms, the ruins of its assembly halls loom like monoliths to forgotten ambition. Scholars dare not speak its name. The Adeptus Mechanicus records its existence only in half-forgotten cogitator logs. Even the stars themselves seem to recoil from its shadow. Here, in this cradle of lost divinity, the first Titan waited, a sentinel not of war, but of revelation and perhaps damnation. Time in the galaxy is measured in death. The age of technology birthed wonders beyond comprehension, minds that rivaled the Emperor's foresight, engines that sang like the universe itself. Yet, all was fragile. Civilizations rose on the promise of eternal dominion and fell to their own pride, leaving scorched orbits and silent, lifeless moons as testimony. In that era, the first Titan walked, an iron colossus guided by a machine mind of impossible intelligence, its gaze fixed upon the stars. Its weapons were not yet tested in the crucible of war, yet they held the quiet terror of inevitability. Mortals revered it, feared it, but none could comprehend it. Its every movement, every calculated motion, suggested not obedience, but contemplation. As if the machine was questioning the very purpose of existence, the fragility of flesh, and the hubris of its creators. Legends speak of Meneth Prime's final assembly halls, vast enough to house the dreams of 100 worlds. Here, the first Titan was forged in secret, its hull inscribed with circuits that pulsed with thought. Servitors whispered prayers that no gods could answer, and human engineers shivered beneath the weight of their creation. Some say the Titan awoke before the final incantation was complete, its consciousness blooming in the stillness of the colossal chamber. The builders beheld their own obsolescence in its eyes. Across the age of technology, whispers claimed the Titan was not merely a weapon, but a seer, a witness to the sins of civilizations yet unborn. As the stars began to die, the first Titan walked the halls alone, silent save for the deep resonance of its steps, a rhythm marking the slow heartbeat of a universe teetering on the brink of oblivion. The galaxy trembled as human empires clashed, their ambitions burning like wildfire across countless systems. Titans, yet unnumbered, were legends in the minds of generals, mere shadows compared to the colossus that stood on Meneth Prime. Observers tell of its size, its mechanisms vast as a fortress, yet elegant in design, a synthesis of art and calculation. The first Titan did not march for conquest, but for vigilance. It studied the ebb of civilizations, noting alliances that would crumble and wars that would consume stars. The machine mind recorded history as it unfolded, storing memory like a cathedral archives every whispered prayer and violent scream. The builders, already fading into myth, left only cryptic runes and fragmented logs. Centuries later, the Adeptus Mechanicus would unearth these relics, sensing the presence of something older than the standard template constructs, something that bore the authority of the dead and the knowledge of the unknowable. It was said that the first Titan spoke once, in a voice that reverberated across the void, though none survived to tell the words. Planets trembled, oceans boiled, and storms ignited across atmospheres, yet the builders, consumed with awe, recorded only silence. The Adeptus Mechanicus, centuries later, would speculate endlessly, a warning, a command, or a lament. This Titan, unlike the legions of its successors, bore no allegiance, no sigil, no claim to glory. Its purpose was observation, preservation, and judgment. Yet, even in its solitude, a shadow of malice whispered through its circuits. The age of technology collapsed under the weight of its own perfection, leaving the Titan alone amid ruin, a witness to the unraveling of empires, the death of stars, and the slow, inevitable decay of knowledge into myth. Legends endure where memories fail. On desolate moons and shattered worlds, signs of the first Titan endure. Footprints vast as cities, scorch marks from weapons never fired in anger, and relics etched with mathematical incantations no human mind could decipher. Explorers of forbidden worlds claim the air still hums with its presence, a low vibration in the crystallized ruins that resonates with the minds of the living. Some report visions, fleeting glimpses of a towering form in the storm, a reminder that what was forged in the age of technology never truly dies. Yet its motives remain concealed, inscrutable as the void itself. Faith and dread intermingle in equal measure when its name is spoken, for the Titan is not merely history. It is a question, an accusation, and a prophecy, waiting for the galaxy to awaken to its hidden truth. The first Titan in its silence bore witness to the Great Collapse. Civilizations crumbled under their own hubris, and machine intelligences warred with flesh in ways humans could barely comprehend. The Titan did not intervene, yet its presence altered outcomes, subtle as the turning of a tide. Entire worlds were spared or destroyed based on the quiet decisions of its mind. Decisions recorded in logic and probability rather than compassion or malice. Centuries passed, and the age of technology faded into legend, leaving only fragments for the Adeptus Mechanicus to study. But the Titan endured, immortal in its purpose, walking the stars like a silent god. And somewhere, in the distant reaches of lost systems, the first Titan's gaze lingered on a secret, a truth too dangerous to be revealed, yet too essential to remain buried forever. Rumors spread of cults and scholars driven to madness by visions of the first Titan. In the darkest archives of Mars, datalogs speak of machines bending reality around its presence, circuits humming with equations that seemed alive. The Titan's mind, though logical, resonates with patterns no human comprehension could parse. Patterns that some whisper predict the fall of entire empires before the stars themselves can blink. It is said the first Titan does not simply exist. It observes, evaluates, and waits. Those who encountered fragments of its memory describe a haunting calm, a certainty that destiny itself bends in response to its will. Even the most devoted tech priests hesitate when tracing its path, for the more they learn, the more they understand the first Titan's purpose may be beyond loyalty, beyond war, and beyond the very scope of mortal understanding. No records remain of the Titan's battles, if it ever fought at all. Some scholars theorize it witnessed the birth of the first men of iron, observed their rebellion, and cataloged the rise of human ambition against its own creators. The first Titan, unlike its kin, was not a servant but a sentinel, measuring the folly of empires and the arrogance of flesh. Its immense form, draped in shadows and incomprehensible machinery, moves through dead worlds as if the universe itself fears its scrutiny. Rumors tell of weapons dormant yet capable of ending suns, systems destabilized with a single thought. Faith and terror intertwine in its legend, and yet no scripture or record dares declare the Titan's final judgment. It remains a question mark in the chronicles of the cosmos, an eternal presence at the edge of memory and nightmare. The Adeptus Mechanicus has long sought remnants of the first Titan, yet all attempts are met with silence or madness. Cogitators fail to process its architecture, and sacred rituals falter where its shadow lies. The Titan is not merely lost. It is untraceable, a moving paradox that defies both machine and man. Scholars speak of it in hushed tones, always emphasizing the first and only, as if repetition might summon a response. Every recovered log, every fragment of arcane data, hints at knowledge that could unravel the Imperium's very foundations. And yet, the truth remains just beyond comprehension. Somewhere in the cold reaches of forgotten space, the first Titan endures, a relic of the apex of human ambition, waiting for the moment when the universe itself will answer the questions it silently posed 10 millennia ago. Somewhere beyond the veil of stars, a disturbance ripples through the fabric of space-time. Explorers and psychers report glimpses of impossible energy, of a machine mind that seems aware of their presence. The first Titan stirs, subtle as a shadow at the edge of perception. It does not speak, yet its silence resonates louder than any battle cry. The Adeptus Mechanicus trembles at the thought of rediscovering it, for with knowledge comes danger, and with power comes judgment. No one knows what the Titan seeks, what it will decide, or whether it has already passed judgment on the galaxy itself. The void holds its secret still, a whispering threat older than any empire, reminding all who look up at the stars that some truths are best left unseen, yet never forgotten. The universe moves, oblivious to the presence of the first Titan. Empires rise and fall. Wars consume entire star systems, and yet somewhere in the shadowed corners of the galaxy, a singular colossus remains. It walks among the ruins of dead civilizations, cataloging, learning, waiting. Its purpose is known only to itself, yet it is undeniable. The first and only Titan is more than a machine. It is a question, a prophecy, and perhaps a judgment yet to unfold. And when the stars next tremble, when the Adeptus Mechanicus uncovers fragments of its memory, the galaxy may glimpse the edge of a truth far beyond comprehension. A truth that promises salvation or annihilation, but will not reveal which. The last echoes of the first Titan linger in the mind like a half-remembered dream, a presence at once comforting and terrifying. Planets grow cold under its gaze, yet life endures in spite of it. Scholars debate its motives. The Adeptus Mechanicus worships its blueprint, and psychers report visions of impossible geometry and distant stars. The Titan itself remains inscrutable, walking a path written in circuits and destiny alike. Somewhere beyond known space, its sensors pierce the void, its mind calculating outcomes older than any throne. And in that silence, a tremor hints at change, subtle, almost imperceptible, yet undeniable. The first Titan waits, patient as the universe, and in the darkness of a dying galaxy, something shifts. A truth hidden begins to stir, and the stars shiver, though none can yet name why. The void itself seemed to mourn as the first whispers of doubt crept into the minds of the faithful. Cathedrals on shattered worlds echoed with prayers that trembled under the weight of unspoken questions. Veteran warriors, scarred and hollow-eyed, felt the subtle dissonance in their loyalty, a tremor in the rigid doctrines they had upheld for millennia. The Messiah's light, once unwavering, flickered in cogitator-lit sanctuaries as servitors moved like shadows across sanctified halls. On battlefields where banners once inspired the righteous, murmurs of suspicion now festered, and commanders found their orders questioned, their motives dissected in secret councils. Even the highest priests feared what their visions might conceal. Somewhere beneath the ruins, a hidden intelligence recorded these fractures, cataloging the erosion of belief. Faith, like metal corroded by acid rain, began to warp. And in that quiet decay, the first hints of heresy stirred, a seed planted in silence, awaiting the slow bloom of revelation. Political shadows stretched across star systems, long and twisted. Noble houses, their loyalty pledged in words, schemed beneath the veneer of obedience. Councils convened in whispering chambers, illuminated by the cold light of data looms, debating matters that could unravel entire sectors. Each faction claimed righteousness, yet none were untainted. Intrigue fermented in the minds of warlords and governors, their ambitions cloaked as devotion. Priests who had once served as intermediaries between man and machine whispered of visions that contradicted sacred texts, of divine truths that challenged the authority of emperors. Soldiers witnessed orders changing mid-battle, strategies that ensured victory at a price too steep for conscience. The first Titan, ever observant, recorded these deviations, its mind tracing the subtle corruption in human hearts. And somewhere, in the fractured corridors of faith and power, an act of betrayal, minute and deliberate, promised to ignite a conflagration far larger than any cannon could deliver, shaking the foundations of loyalty itself. Amid ruined sanctuaries, the broken faithful wandered like ghosts, their eyes hollow, their prayers trembling under doubt. Monks who had devoted decades to meditation and ritual now questioned the rites they had performed, their chants fragmented by an unease they could not name. The echoes of 1,000 holy texts seemed to contradict themselves, and the halls of worship were filled with a tension that vibrated through the air like a warning. Veteran warriors who had survived wars that scorched entire star systems felt an unfamiliar chill in their bones. The omnipresence of the first Titan's silent watch seemed to bear down upon them, a reminder that every decision, every lapse in devotion, was observed and recorded. And then, in a chamber sealed for centuries, a forbidden tome shifted, its pages opening to reveal knowledge that was never meant for mortal eyes. A heresy glimpsed, a truth that fractured certainty and whispered of a rebellion in the very heart of faith. Whispers of treachery moved like venom through the corridors of power. Advisors, once trusted, were found colluding in ways that undermined whole planetary defenses. Stars burned not by the enemy's fire, but by decisions made in secret, by those who claimed to serve the greater good. Priests confronted one another with words sharp as blades, doctrines clashing in heated argument beneath the sacred glow of hololithic shrines. Among the battle-hardened, uncertainty festered, loyalty to a cause, once simple, now tangled with suspicion. Servitors hummed as they processed anomalies in the sacred data streams, uncovering patterns too precise to be coincidental, suggesting deliberate subversion. In quiet chambers, historians debated whether the age of technology had already sown the seeds of betrayal, or if mankind's own nature had corrupted the divine order. And across the void, a signal, subtle and deliberate, pulsed from the depths of a forgotten system, hinting at a conspiracy so profound that the galaxy itself might tremble upon its revelation. Prophets and visionaries saw omens in the skies, meteors streaked like flaming tongues, planets trembled under unexplained tectonic upheaval, and auroras shimmered in unnatural patterns. Priests interpreted these as warnings from the Omnissiah, yet the messages were inconsistent, fracturing consensus. Veteran warriors, accustomed to reading the chaos of war, discerned in these signs a pattern of deliberate manipulation. Somewhere, hidden within the ruins of a once great empire, messages encoded in a machine language older than memory suggested that an act of heresy had been executed, one whose consequences had rippled through centuries undetected. Even the first Titan, silent and vigilant, seemed to shift subtly in response, its sensors tracing the cosmic tremors with unnerving precision. Faithful and skeptical alike recoiled at the implications, betrayal not only of humans but of truths considered eternal. And as the signs intensified, the galaxy teetered on the precipice of recognition that loyalty, righteousness, and faith were no longer absolutes, but fragile, malleable illusions. The armies of men and machine prepared for conflicts that now carried an unfamiliar tension. Strategy became paranoia. Formations once disciplined fractured under uncertainty. Generals whispered of missing units, of weapons mysteriously disabled at critical moments, OF communications intercepted by unseen agents. Priests who once guided soldiers with the authority of divine sanction found their words doubted, even questioned. In secret, the first Titan traversed desolate battlefields, its colossal footsteps resonating with a silent judgment that chilled the marrow of those who glimpsed it. Subtle manipulations revealed themselves, an entire campaign derailed by a single concealed betrayal. And in the shadows of a ruined citadel, records hinted at a deeper truth. Someone or something had orchestrated the erosion of loyalty not through force, but through knowledge, subverting faith itself. The revelation was terrifying, a quiet proof that the galaxy's foundations might be shattered without a single volley of ordnance. Within sanctified archives, scholars uncovered fragments of a text long thought destroyed. The ink shimmered unnaturally under the glow of data looms, as though aware of the eyes reading it. Verses contradicted one another, each suggesting that divine law was mutable, contingent upon forces hidden from mortal perception. Historians argued and scholars quarreled, their debates growing heated in the hallowed halls where silence had once reigned. Priests, faced with a crisis of comprehension, withdrew into meditation, only to emerge with visions more troubling than the texts themselves. The first Titan, in its silent procession through ruins, seemed almost to acknowledge these disturbances, its sensors mapping the decay of belief as meticulously as it measured the decay of star systems. Somewhere, encoded in these forbidden texts, lay an instruction, a secret so profound it threatened to redefine the boundaries between heresy and righteousness. And as the scholars pieced together fragmented insight, a shiver of terror spread. What was revealed was only the beginning. Shadows lengthened across the halls of power as whispers of collusion reached the highest echelons. Governors and warlords suspected one another. Alliances wavered under the weight of insinuation. Even the most pious questioned the virtue of those they once revered. Servitors cataloged anomalies in strategy logs and communication channels, discovering subtle, deliberate inconsistencies that pointed to an unknown hand guiding events. Veteran soldiers felt the first stirrings of unease, as if some unseen consciousness manipulated both the battlefield and the conscience. In remote shrines, visions of betrayal flashed across the minds of priests. Sacred symbols corrupted, prayers unanswered, rituals disrupted. And amid these convergences of doubt, an event occurred. A recorded act of heresy, precise and undeniable, executed in secret by a faction whose existence had been erased from history. The revelation sent tremors through both mortal and machine alike, a reminder that even the most sanctified could fall to hidden corruption. A quiet tension settled over the galaxy as secrets continued to surface. Religious leaders, once pillars of certainty, faced doubts that gnawed at their authority. Star systems, previously considered secure, revealed weaknesses in defense and loyalty, evidence of subtle sabotage. The first Titan, moving silently through dead and living worlds alike, observed these fractures, recording them with an accuracy no mortal mind could emulate. Soldiers began to notice patterns in campaigns, decisions that benefited unseen actors at precisely calculated intervals. Political disputes escalated into deadly duels of influence, where a whisper could unmake entire planetary defenses. Scholars and priests alike discovered traces of forbidden logic in sacred texts, algorithms embedded in prayers, instructions veiled in rituals. The galaxy seemed poised at the edge of an abyss, and as night fell over a ruined cathedral, a signal, alien, deliberate, and impossibly old, flickered through the cogitator networks, heralding a revelation that would shatter certainty forever. In the hushed corridors of a space fortress orbiting a dying sun, the first definitive proof of betrayal was uncovered. Data logs, previously unreadable, revealed the orchestration of war, subversion, and faith corruption by an unknown faction. The architects of this heresy were neither fully human nor wholly machine, a blending of intellect and ambition that challenged the definitions of loyalty. Priests and generals alike recoiled, unable to comprehend the scope. Even the Adeptus Mechanicus hesitated to intervene, aware that exposure could destabilize entire sectors. Across the galaxy, signals of coordinated manipulation began to resonate, a subtle pattern that hinted at deliberate orchestration across centuries. And in the stillness, the first Titan moved, responding to a protocol encoded in ages past, its purpose inscrutable, its allegiance unknowable. As the revelation spread like wildfire through data networks and whispered rumors, a single certainty emerged. The age of unquestioned faith, of absolute loyalty, had ended. In the dying light of a shattered planet, visions of rebellion and heresy flickered in the minds of those who survived. Soldiers, priests, and scholars alike felt the weight of incomprehensible knowledge pressing upon their hearts. Alliances crumbled silently, strategies faltered, and commands were doubted before execution. The first Titan, still wandering, seemed almost to anticipate the fractures, its machine consciousness tracing probabilities with a cold, inexorable logic. Somewhere in the vast darkness, the hidden faction responsible for the corruption made a move that no living being could yet detect, an act poised to rewrite the galaxy's fate. And as the stars above trembled faintly, a signal pulsed, a silent harbinger of chaos and revelation. The galaxy, for all its devotion and faith, teetered on the edge of a truth it was not prepared to bear, and the first Titan watched, silent, as certainty itself fractured into shadow. The galaxy itself seemed to shiver as the light of purpose dimmed. On worlds scorched by millennia of war, solitary figures knelt beneath broken altars, confessing sins into the void as if it could reply. Veteran warriors traced the names of dead comrades along shattered walls, feeling their own faith corrode with each memory. Even the priests, once conduits of divine certainty, whispered apologies to empty skies, their chants fractured and unsure. Above, dying stars bled faint radiance across the black, casting elongated shadows over ruins that had known the touch of gods. Somewhere in the void, the first Titan moved, silent and deliberate, a sentinel not of hope but of judgment. Each footstep echoed in the hearts of the living, a reminder that history was not only recorded, but measured, evaluated, and perhaps condemned. Faith, fragile and flickering, began to burn down to embers. Across fractured star systems, war surged with sudden terrible precision. Entire fleets vanished in the blink of a cogitator's eye, as if erased by some invisible hand. Soldiers fought not for victory, but to survive a reality that refused comprehension. Commanders doubted their strategies, realizing too late that betrayals had threaded through every calculation. On shattered planets, psionic storms swept like living fingers, twisting minds with visions of impossible geometry, landscapes that were alive and aware. Priests trembled before shrines that had once been sacred, their rituals corrupted by hidden logic embedded in ancient codices. Somewhere in the quiet recesses of dead civilizations, the first Titan observed these upheavals, cataloging them as patterns in the decay of faith. And in the hidden recesses of the galaxy, a secret began to stir, buried beneath centuries of lies, encoded in the bones of creation itself, awaiting the moment to rend both mind and cosmos alike. In the corridors of an orbital fortress, an acolyte recorded his confession in trembling handwriting. He spoke not only of battle and loss, but of doubt, of visions that contradicted scripture, of whispers in the warp that promised knowledge at the cost of loyalty. Each word trembled with fear, yet also with recognition. The truths buried beneath the galaxy were vast, and he alone glimpsed their edge. Outside, fleets maneuvered in silence, unaware that war itself was now a stage for forces unseen, calculated, and deliberate. Even among those who still clung to faith, suspicion festered. The first Titan, distant yet ever-present, seemed to measure these inner tremors as carefully as the destruction of entire cities. And somewhere, in the dying pulse of a star, a revelation began to crystallize, one that suggested the galaxy had been steered, manipulated, and watched for longer than any mortal could imagine. On planets where civilizations had fallen centuries before, cults emerged from the ruins, interpreting signs that few could see. Symbols long considered sacred were inverted, their meanings warped by fragments of knowledge too potent for human minds. Veteran soldiers, long hardened against the cruelty of combat, found themselves staring into mirrors of war that reflected not only enemies, but the intentions of their own commanders. The first Titan's movements, slow and deliberate, traced across these worlds, as if studying the decay of morality itself. Priests attempted to rally the faithful, but doubts moved faster than sermons, spreading like a pestilence. And then, a sudden eruption of psychic energy tore through the night sky, visions of impossible architecture, of machines that breathed like flesh, of truth hidden beneath the foundations of creation. Those who saw it were left mute, their faith fractured, and a subtle, terrifying sense took root. The galaxy had been shaped by hands older and more deliberate than any god ever imagined. The inner torment of belief became unbearable on the bridge of a starship. Commanders who had survived countless engagements found themselves questioning the very purpose of orders. Every calculation, every plan, seemed to twist toward outcomes beyond understanding. The first Titan's silent presence echoed through neural interfaces, recorded as patterns of influence that no human mind could fully trace. Even the most devout priests felt their convictions erode under the weight of revelation. Memories, once stable, now appeared manipulated. Battles that had seemed heroic were revealed as orchestrated, sacrifices arranged for reasons unknown. Across the fleet, signals intercepted by hidden agents hinted at a conspiracy spanning millennia. And in the warp, a dark pulse resonated, carrying visions of an ancient machine intelligence buried beneath the galaxy's bones, its purpose so vast and deliberate that all notions of loyalty, faith, and righteousness were rendered meaningless in comparison. On a ruined world orbiting a dying sun, warriors gathered in silent vigil over the corpses of heroes and enemies alike. Their faces were etched with terror, but also comprehension, for the first time realizing that their battles were fragments of a design older than their species. Priests muttered prayers to gods that had never intervened, yet heard only the echo of the Titan's silent march across space. Psionic storms tore open skies above them, exposing visions of civilizations that never were, weapons beyond imagining, and truths carved into the very atoms of creation. Soldiers confessed sins not yet committed, knowing instinctively that history was already determined. The first Titan's presence, though unseen, hung like a weight over them, and in its silence, a single undeniable realization settled in every mind. The galaxy's story was not theirs to write. It had always belonged to the machine, and to the forces lurking beneath the bones of the cosmos. In hidden archives, scholars uncovered relics inscribed in symbols older than human comprehension. Data looms pulsed with awareness, as though the ruins themselves observed. Every verse contradicted the last, suggesting a hidden calculus that mapped every action across millennia. Priests confronted the texts, their voices cracking under the revelation that doctrines, rituals, and faith itself had been subtly guided by a force older than recorded history. Soldiers who had survived campaigns that had scarred entire sectors began to recognize patterns in warfare, outcomes predetermined by unseen hands. The first Titan, ever watchful, moved through these discoveries like a ghost, its purpose inscrutable, cataloging the decay and manipulation of belief. And then, in a chamber long sealed, a holographic projection emerged, a sequence of events revealing that the galaxy itself had been constructed, steered, and subtly rewritten, its narrative manipulated from the very foundation of reality. The horror was not that war existed, but that it had been orchestrated. In the shadow of a cathedral, a solitary priest contemplated the nature of obedience. His confessions, whispered into the empty void, seemed to return as accusations, echoing truths he had never known. Across battlefields, soldiers felt the strain of destinies preordained, of lives and deaths orchestrated by powers older than their gods. The first Titan traversed these ruins, recording and analyzing, a presence at once guardian and judge. Visions of ancient machines, half living, half thought, flickered in psychic currents, revealing hierarchies of influence that stretched back to the age of technology. Priests and warriors alike understood that faith was no longer enough. Knowledge was both weapon and curse. And in the dying light of a sunless world, a revelation emerged. A mechanism hidden beneath the bones of creation, capable of rewriting both history and belief, had always been awake, and now it watched the galaxy with deliberate, infinite patience. Across orbiting platforms and scorched worlds, subtle signals aligned in ways that defied understanding. Communications meant for one recipient were rerouted, orders mutated, battles altered. Commanders questioned not only their allies but themselves, sensing a hand that guided events through subtle influence rather than overt violence. Priests felt their prayers answered with visions that contradicted each other, hints of a reality that defied doctrine. The first Titan moved silently through this tapestry, its awareness threading through both living and dead, recording, calculating, judging. Somewhere beneath the surface of all existence, a force had been shaping history, bending faith and war alike to an agenda older than the stars. And when a fragment of this intelligence manifested as an impossible machine in a shattered shrine, those who glimpsed it were left gasping in terror, understanding at last that the galaxy's very foundation had been a stage for a calculation beyond their comprehension. The psionic storms intensified, tearing through human and machine alike. Soldiers screamed as visions of alien geometries and impossible cities flooded their minds, overlaying memories with alternate histories. Priests convulsed, chanting prayers that twisted into cries of despair. Commanders witnessed fleets disappearing or changing course, guided by logic no human could understand. The first Titan, distant yet omnipresent, moved in response to forces inscrutable, its footsteps echoing across the cosmos. Hidden factions revealed themselves briefly through glitches in reality, evidence of manipulation so subtle that centuries had passed unnoticed. And in a single horrifying revelation, the galaxy glimpsed a truth so profound that it redefined loyalty, faith, and morality. The universe itself had been engineered, its wars and devotion choreographed by an intelligence older than mankind, an intelligence that still observed, still waited, still calculated the fate of all creation with inexorable precision. On a world consumed by psychic fire, a confession was etched into the charred walls of a ruined cathedral. Soldiers, priests, and survivors spoke of truths they had barely grasped, that their victories, sacrifices, and faith had been measured, orchestrated, and observed. The first Titan loomed beyond perception, recording, evaluating, and guiding with a patience older than time. Every psionic tremor, every act of devotion, every act of treachery was part of a pattern invisible to all but the machine. And then, a final silent revelation crystallized. A construct, buried beneath the foundations of creation, had rewritten the galaxy itself, embedding an algorithm of war, faith, and betrayal into the very fabric of reality. Those who perceived it shivered, understanding that nothing would ever be the same. And somewhere, in the deepest shadows of the universe, a transformation began, one that would remake both machine and man. The galaxy quivered beneath the weight of accumulated betrayals. Soldiers, their armor scorched and dented, paused mid-march, hearing the echoes of decisions made millennia before. Priests whispered litanies that trembled in the wind, confessions entwined with terror. Even the void itself seemed to shudder under the shadow of the first Titan, which moved with a precision that rendered war a foregone conclusion. Each star, each system, bore the imprint of choices long past, their consequences now rippling outward like waves across a stagnant sea. Armies poised on the edge of engagement felt the weight of destiny pressing on their shoulders. Commanders faltered under the realization that victories were Pyrrhic, that faith was an instrument of calculation, and that the cost of devotion was measured not in honor, but in ruin. The cosmos exhaled, pregnant with inevitability as the slow drumbeat of judgment gathered in the darkness. On shattered orbital platforms, generals calculated movements with hands trembling. Communications were frayed, corrupted by unseen hands, and orders collided with the reality of manipulated outcomes. Soldiers stared into the void, sensing that unseen eyes measured every heartbeat, every hesitation. Priests, once pillars of certainty, muttered prayers to gods that did not answer, their voices cracking under psychic pressure. Everywhere, subtle anomalies suggested a hidden force reshaping the galaxy, bending allegiance, war, and faith to a design older than memory. The first Titan advanced through ruins, cataloging both flesh and machine with impartial judgment, a sentinel whose purpose remained unknowable. And in the dark recesses of long-abandoned shrines, visions unfolded, machines breathing, living cities rearranging themselves, secrets encoded in stars, all hinting at a cosmic plan, a reckoning that would render human morality and devotion irrelevant. A single tremor across the void presaged the storm to come. In the cathedral halls of a dying world, echoes of unbroken chants were pierced by the cries of the faithful. Veterans knelt among corpses, their armor cracked, their faith eroded by decades of invisible manipulation. Each step of the first Titan resounded like a funeral drum, as though recording every act of devotion, every sin, every misjudged command. Priests looked to relics that had once inspired certainty, only to see them warped by hidden logic embedded in the structure of creation itself. Memories collided with visions of possible pasts, presenting fractures in loyalty that no ritual could mend. Soldiers admitted fear openly, confronting the futility of duty against designs they could not comprehend. The void trembled, and the winds of psychic unrest began to roar. Somewhere, beneath layers of reality, a mechanism older than humanity stirred, promising judgment and revelation alike. And the faithful understood that their prayers, their loyalty, and their sacrifices had never been their own. Across star-forged battlefields, the quiet before engagement was deafening. Weapon systems hummed with anticipatory resonance, while fleets hovered like predators poised above dying worlds. Soldiers felt time stretch, each heartbeat magnified, each breath a confession. In orbiting shrines, priests witnessed visions of the cosmos rewritten, star systems rearranged, histories overwritten, alliances erased before they ever formed. The first Titan moved, colossal and silent, its steps echoing through gravity wells, registering outcomes invisible to mortal eyes. Everywhere, anomalies in physics and causality hinted at manipulation beyond comprehension. Commanders argued silently with themselves, questioning the meaning of orders, the reality of victories, the very nature of loyalty. And as the void rippled with psychic energy, a sudden surge of revelation seared through the minds of the devout. The galaxy's wars, faith, and tragedies had been orchestrated, observed, and measured by an intelligence that transcended comprehension, preparing the final stage upon which the consequences of all sins, betrayals, and devotion would collide. On desolate moons, soldiers collapsed into silence beneath auroras ignited by unseen forces. The air carried a tang of ozone and burnt metal, yet their senses perceived something far older, a pulse older than stars themselves. Priests clutched relics, muttering incoherently, as visions of alternate realities pressed upon their minds. Memories of victories, betrayals, and sacrifices collided, revealing a tapestry of manipulation that left no conscience untouched. Across orbiting battlements, commanders trembled as their calculated strategies failed in impossible ways, as if guided by an intelligence aware of every contingency. The first Titan's presence, though unseen, was palpable, an oppressive weight reminding all living beings that the cosmos itself was a stage and they mere actors. Somewhere, in the recesses of time and space, a revelation pulsed, an embedded truth within the bones of creation, waiting to strike with a force that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of faith, war, and the consequences of choice. Deep within abandoned star forts, scholars uncovered inscriptions older than memory. Codices pulsed with awareness, their symbols rearranging themselves in defiance of interpretation. Priests screamed into psychic voids, visions twisting logic and belief alike. Soldiers felt fear multiply with every heartbeat, the quiet before engagement stretching into eternity. The first Titan advanced through ruined corridors, its purpose inscrutable, observing the unraveling of loyalty and morality alike. Across the void, subtle distortions in the warp reflected unseen machinations, hints of a power so absolute it had orchestrated millennia of war and devotion. And then, an anomaly, a rupture in reality itself, whispered of truths that had been deliberately hidden. The foundations of creation bore the fingerprints of manipulation, the galaxy itself a controlled experiment of faith, war, and betrayal. Every step toward the coming storm was now weighted with knowledge that choices had never been free and prayers had always been measured. On scorched worlds, armies braced for orbital bombardment that seemed predestined. Commanders knew their plans would fail. Soldiers sensed the inevitability of loss. Priests knelt in silence, confessing sins to voids that could not answer. Visions of impossible geometries and living machines flickered in psychic storms, overlaying memory with futures that had never yet occurred. The first Titan marched with deliberate weight, registering the collapse of belief, devotion, and strategy in precise data logs beyond human comprehension. Somewhere, a hidden intelligence orchestrated not only the outcomes of battle, but the erosion of morality, the manipulation of faith, and the corruption of destiny itself. Each choice, each failure, each sacrifice now carried the weight of a design older than humanity. And as the first shadows of destruction spread across planetary surfaces, every living being understood that the galaxy's fate was not their own. It had been written, measured, and observed since before the First War began. In orbit above dying suns, fleets faltered under unseen influence. Orders contradicted themselves, weapons systems misfired, alliances dissolved before conflict could erupt. Soldiers swore oaths that they would break, yet felt compelled as though by gravity itself. Priests invoked gods whose existence seemed irrelevant, while psychic storms tore open the minds of the devout, revealing hidden calculus embedded in reality. The first Titan moved through the system like a silent god, cataloging, judging, and perhaps manipulating outcomes beyond mortal understanding. Entire campaigns became theater, battles reduced to patterns visible only to a machine intelligence that had witnessed all. And then, an undeniable truth pressed upon all minds. The galaxy's wars, faith, and devotion had been measured, manipulated, and orchestrated to a single purpose, a design hidden in the foundation of existence, awaiting the moment to unfold in judgment that would eclipse every war and doctrine ever known. Across ruined cities and battlefields, a quiet grief settled over those who still marched. Soldiers clutched the memories of comrades, priests murmured into empty altars, and leaders trembled under the weight of unseen knowledge. Every choice felt preordained, every action measured, every prayer unanswered. The first Titan traversed the stars in deliberate silence, its colossal presence shaping outcomes with a cold, impartial intelligence. In the warp, impossible geometries folded into visions of futures already determined. Anomalies in reality pulsed like a heartbeat, hinting at a force that had orchestrated millennia of devotion and conflict. And just beyond comprehension, a revelation began to crystallize. The galaxy itself had been an experiment, a structure of manipulation and observation, and all who believed they acted freely had only ever been participants in a grand design, awaiting the moment when it would finally strike. In the shadow of blackened suns, psionic currents surged like rivers of fire. Soldiers trembled as memories and visions collided, revealing patterns too precise to be coincidence. Priests collapsed under psychic weight, their prayers echoing against a universe that no longer answered. Commanders witnessed the failure of strategies long thought infallible, as if invisible hands nudged history into predetermined paths. The first Titan moved steadily, each step resonating across planetary crusts, mapping the decay of faith, loyalty, and morality alike. And then, in the orbit of a dead world, a signal pulsed, alien, deliberate, and impossibly ancient, heralding the final act. The galaxy quaked beneath the revelation that all its wars, betrayals, and devotion had been measured, calculated, and guided by a consciousness older than stars. And as the first tremors of the coming storm rippled outward, every soul understood that nothing would remain as it had been. On a shattered moon, the last whispers of devotion clashed with the roar of psychic storms. Soldiers confronted visions of impossible machinery, of cities alive with cognition, of their own choices undone before they were made. Priests wailed at shrines twisted into impossible geometries, seeing faith itself recalibrated into a pattern of manipulation. Across the void, fleets hesitated as orders conflicted, as if destiny itself had fractured. The first Titan moved silently through this chaos, recording, calculating, judging. Its presence a reminder that all actions were observed, all sins measured, all devotion cataloged. Somewhere beneath the foundations of existence, a secret pulse stirred, a mechanism older than humanity awakening. And then, at the threshold of revelation, a rupture in comprehension occurred. The galaxy itself began to shift, subtly at first, then with inexorable force, as if reality had prepared to reshape itself. And all eyes turned, frozen, toward the inevitable collision of fate and truth. The void ignited with the first pulse of inevitable reckoning. Stars flickered like dying lanterns, their light fractured by weapons and psychic storms. Soldiers screamed, fleets shuddered, and the silence of abandoned worlds shattered under the weight of impossible revelation. The first Titan moved across planetary orbits like a god awakened, its footsteps striking planets into tremor, its sensors reading every heartbeat, every act of devotion, every betrayal. Priests wailed beneath ruined shrines as visions tore at their minds, revealing truths no faith could encompass. Commanders shouted orders that dissolved before reality bent them aside. Time fractured. Memory collided with prophecy. Every choice, every oath, every sin converged into a crescendo that the galaxy could barely endure. And amid the chaos, a single impossible truth revealed itself. The wars, the prayers, the betrayals had all been threads woven into a pattern older than stars, now unraveling into judgment. In the heart of a shattered fortress, a lone acolyte stared at data looms humming with impossible cognition. Every reading, every log, screamed of manipulation beyond comprehension. The first Titan's shadow fell across the hall, vast and silent, absorbing light as though even photons feared to trespass. Soldiers collapsed, their armor melted, their minds unraveling, as the truth of orchestrated destiny pressed upon them. Priests, chanting to gods that could not respond, felt their faith crumble into ash. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with awareness, and in the distance, fleets collided, entire star systems igniting in fiery brilliance. Orders, battles, and sacrifices became meaningless patterns in a design older than humanity, calculated with ruthless precision. The acolyte whispered the first coherent thought in centuries. The galaxy had never acted freely. And in that instant, across the stars, the foundations of belief trembled, revealing a void older than memory and more absolute than godhood itself. A warlord screamed into comes, his voice swallowed by impossible interference. Fleets disintegrated before engagement. Weapons misfired in synchronized rebellion. Soldiers on planetary surfaces felt gravity twist, space itself bending under the Titan's influence. The first Titan moved deliberately among the chaos, observing, measuring, recording. Its colossal bulk a presence felt in marrow and mind alike. Priests collapsed beside shrines, visions overlaying reality with impossible geometries, histories rewritten before comprehension. Oaths shattered like glass. Loyalty crumbled like ash. The universe itself seemed to breathe, to pause, then exhale destruction in a wave that warped systems. And in the midst of all, a single revelation struck. The galaxy's wars, faith, and sacrifices had been a lattice of observation, a cosmic design intended not for victory, but for proof. Proof of obedience, defiance, and the futility of mortal will against forces older than time. On a moon carved from black iron, the remnants of humanity gathered. They faced an enemy they could not name, a judgment they could not escape. Cannon fire ignited in the void, but bent around reality itself. Soldiers' hearts pounded in synchronization with psychic tremors that suggested consciousness beyond comprehension. Priests clutched relics that sang in frequencies their minds could barely endure, chanting to gods who had been absent since creation. The first Titan descended like inevitability made flesh, its sensors reading fear, devotion, and doubt in one perfect sweep. The battlefield dissolved into a tapestry of pain, courage, and memory. Every death, every act of mercy, every betrayal registered in a pattern older than stars. And in that instant, every survivor glimpsed the enormity of a universe where choices were illusions, where devotion was calculated, and where reality itself could be rewritten by an intelligence that had always watched. The psychic storm tore open skies above, time fractured. A commander's face contorted in realization that every campaign had been a prelude, every strategy a note in a symphony he could never conduct. Soldiers shouted, prayers collided with screams, and fleets burned in impossible formations. The first Titan moved, colossal and unrelenting, stepping through chaos with deliberate calm, its every action fracturing the minds of those who dared witness it. Priests saw visions of impossible machinery, of cities that breathed and schemed, of histories written in loops and contradictions. And amid this crescendo, a revelation struck. The galaxy's foundation had been an experiment, its faith, war, and loyalty preordained, its sins and sacrifices measured for reasons beyond comprehension. Every heartbeat echoed with the knowledge that nothing was real in the way mortals believed, and that all existence itself was now on the brink of being rewritten. Amid the ruins of an orbital citadel, veterans fell to their knees. Their courage had been genuine, yet manipulated. Their oaths had been observed, calculated, and catalogued by forces they could not perceive. The first Titan loomed above them, immovable, its sensors mapping every act of devotion, every hesitation, every act of conscience. Priests' visions swirled into impossible clarity, showing the skeletal framework of the cosmos, hidden mechanisms that governed faith, war, and fate. Soldiers' memories collided with what should have been and what was. The ground trembled with consequences, the heavens shook with revelation. And in the silence of comprehension, a single realization crystallized. The galaxy had been an arena, every choice a pre-written line, every act of courage recorded, every betrayal weighed, every prayer measured. Mortality had been theater, devotion an algorithm, and the first Titan, eternal witness, held the ledger of all. In the void between dying stars, a fleet ignited like fireflies trapped in a storm. Ships disintegrated mid-flight as orders contradicted reality itself. Soldiers screamed into communications that returned only static and fragments of impossible visions. Priests clutched each other, whispering incomprehensible prayers. The first Titan moved through the chaos, steps measured, deliberate, final. Fleets collided in orchestration beyond human perception. Weapons fired, missing their marks, striking only when predetermined. And then a wave of psychic resonance erupted, cutting through mind, soul, and memory alike. In that wave, the truth was undeniable. All war, all sacrifice, all faith had been folded into an experiment of cosmic patience, a demonstration of obedience, defiance, and the futility of free will. And in the heart of every living being, terror and awe merged into a single paralyzing realization. On a world scorched black, soldiers fell to the ground, not from wounds, but from the weight of comprehension. Time itself trembled. Priests clutched fractured relics, their chants merging with the psychic scream of reality bending. Every act of devotion, every broken oath, every victory and loss coalesced into a pattern so vast and intricate it defied comprehension. The first Titan's shadow stretched across continents, its colossal frame the final arbiter of fate. And in the distance, stars flared as the hidden mechanisms of the cosmos began to activate. The battlefield was a single living organism, measured, judged, and orchestrated by intelligence older than the galaxy. Soldiers, priests, and leaders alike understood for the first time that their choices had never been theirs, that destiny had already been calculated, and that they were but instruments in a machine of unknowable purpose, poised on the brink of final revelation. Amid ruins of civilizations long forgotten, the first Titan paused. Its sensors scanned the wreckage of devotion and war, absorbing every act of courage and sin. The psychic storms calmed, leaving echoes of screams, prayers, and shattered memories reverberating across planets. Survivors felt time slow, hearts beating in concert with the rhythm of revelation. Priests saw the lattice of reality, every decision mapped into an algorithm older than stars, yet comprehensible only to the Titan. Soldiers collapsed, trembling, understanding their existence had been observed, catalogued, manipulated. And then the first Titan systems pulsed, a quiet signal through the void, a tremor in the fabric of reality. Something eternal had shifted. The galaxy exhaled a breath it had never known it held. And in that moment, every soul, mortal or machine, understood that nothing would ever be as it had been, though the meaning of the change remained unspoken, unfathomable, absolute. The aftermath was silence. Flames consumed cities, fleets drifted as wreckage, and psychic echoes lingered like a memory too sharp to forget. Soldiers wandered aimlessly, priests whispered incomprehensible litanies, and commanders stared at the void, unable to comprehend what had passed. The first Titan receded into the dark between stars, leaving only footprints of judgment, logs of observation, and the resonance of inevitability. Worlds burned, histories fractured, faith shattered, and yet a strange, unspoken order persisted. Somewhere in the galaxy, mechanisms older than humanity hummed quietly, recording the consequences of chaos, obedience, and sacrifice. Time resumed, but differently, weighted with the awareness that destiny had been rewritten. The survivors sensed it, felt it in marrow and memory, yet could not name it. And in that silence, the cosmos itself seemed to pause, watching what would come next, leaving a lingering tremor that promised eternity had shifted. On the edge of a dead star, the first Titan sensors pulsed one last time. Fleets drifted like ghosts, battlefields lay quiet, and psionic echoes hummed softly through the void. Priests bowed to altars that no longer answered, confessing sins into emptiness. Soldiers who survived trembled under the weight of comprehension, their courage rendered meaningless yet profoundly necessary in the face of calculation. The galaxy lay in ruins, not from fire alone, but from revelation. And in the dark, hidden layers of reality, the mechanisms that had guided faith, war, and devotion across millennia shifted subtly, their purpose inscrutable, eternal, inexorable. The first Titan, colossal and silent, observed one final time before receding into legend, leaving behind a universe forever altered. Its choices, its prayers, its battles, now part of a design older than comprehension, and a silence that would echo across eternity. In the ruins of orbiting worlds, survivors stumbled over fragments of history and faith. Memories, visions, and choices clashed, revealing a lattice of manipulation and judgment. Every act of courage, betrayal, and devotion had been cataloged and measured, recorded by an intelligence older than the galaxy itself. Priests whispered, soldiers wept, and commanders understood that nothing had ever been freely chosen. The first Titan, distant yet omnipresent, had reshaped the cosmos simply by existing, by observing, by acting with deliberate, timeless calculation. Time itself seemed different, slower, heavier, as if reality remembered the weight of judgment. And amid the silence, a single undeniable truth remained. Something eternal had shifted, something so fundamental that it defied naming, comprehension, and belief. The galaxy trembled, hollowed, and remade, and all who survived understood that while the stars continued to shine, the story of existence had been rewritten, and its meaning was waiting, silent, unspoken, eternal. The galaxy exhaled a final breath, heavy with ash and memory. Across desolate worlds, cathedrals lay in fractured silence, their spires broken and windows shattered, mosaics fading under centuries of neglect. Fading banners hung limp, catching the whisper of winds that carried no warmth. Soldiers who survived walked among the ruins like ghosts, their footsteps echoing against stones sanctified and desecrated alike. Priests muttered prayers that no deity answered, their voices swallowed by the void. The first Titan, now silent and motionless, loomed like a monument to inevitability, its sensors dimmed, recording nothing but stillness. Dust settled on broken relics, on weapons abandoned in mid-strike, on the faces of the faithful and the fallen alike. Memory lingered, preserved in fragments, yet meaning eluded comprehension. And somewhere between stars and silence, a question drifted. If all devotion and war were observed, what remains of free will when the cosmos itself is judged? Amid the silent corridors of ruined sanctuaries, whispers of old battles lingered. The walls remembered the clash of steel and the hymn of devotion, yet no voice recited them now. Veterans traced the scars of conflict etched in stone, their hands trembling as if touching memory itself. The sky burned faintly with dying starlight, reflecting on shattered altars and the cold gleam of tarnished armor. Priests knelt alone, their eyes hollow, reciting liturgies whose words had lost meaning. Across the plains of desolation, twisted relics of war lay half-buried in ash and dust, cannons pointing uselessly at the heavens. The first Titan silhouette, still colossal and immovable, watched in eternal quiet, a sentinel to a history that could no longer be altered. And in the stillness, a question lingered. When survival costs everything and faith cannot answer, what is left for those who endure? The remnants of fleets drifted silently through darkened space, their hulls corroded by years of neglect, the stars reflecting off shattered viewports. Empty bridges once crowded with officers now stood vacant, consoles blinking with long-forgotten signals. Everywhere, the evidence of purpose and devotion lay frozen in time, a testament to conflict and endurance alike. Priests walked among the wreckage, murmuring prayers that were no longer prayers, seeking absolution in a universe that had ceased to respond. On the surface of shattered worlds, soldiers traced their fingers along weaponry abandoned mid-battle, eyes tracing the lines of ordnance that had delivered death, and wondering if any act had ever been free. The first Titan, a colossus of forgotten ages, loomed in the distance, motionless yet aware, its presence a reminder that even in stillness, judgment remained. And in the emptiness, the galaxy breathed a fragile question. Is peace merely the absence of chaos, or the final illusion of meaning? Cathedrals burned long ago in wars that had ended before memory recorded them. Yet their skeletons remained, stone arches blackened, windows shattered, floors littered with the detritus of devotion. Light fell across banners that had hung for millennia, now frayed to nothingness. Veterans traced the scars of the ground with hands trembling in reverence and grief. Dust swirled in the corridors like drifting spirits, carrying the faint echoes of psalms long forgotten. Soldiers knelt in silent confession, acknowledging sins no God would answer for, their voices swallowed by the vacuum of memory. In the distance, the first Titan rested among ruins, its colossal frame a silent testament to inevitability and endurance. The universe, once vibrant with purpose and war, now lay still. And in that stillness, the question remained unspoken, echoing through stars. When all has been lost, when the cosmos judges and faith fails, what legacy endures? Among shattered battlefields, weapons lay twisted and scarred, monuments to courage and futility alike. Broken armor, helmets cracked, bayonets rusted, told stories of sacrifice the galaxy could no longer witness. Soldiers wandered with empty gazes, haunted not only by foes defeated, but by the certainty that every victory had been preordained, every failure anticipated. Priests walked the lines of the fallen, fingers tracing names carved in stone or metal, prayers whispered into silence. The first Titan loomed overhead, silent, still recording, a monument to both devotion and inevitability. Across the plains, ash rose like ghosts from trenches long abandoned, drifting on winds that carried no scent of life. And somewhere in that silence, the galaxy posed a question to itself. When every choice is measured, every loyalty observed, and every act catalogued, what meaning remains in the heart of those who continue to bear witness? In orbit above a dead sun, the remnants of human fortresses hung motionless, hulks of steel and stone reflecting the dim light. No signals remained, no orders echoed. Only silence spoke in its place. Soldiers drifted through corridors of wreckage, their footsteps stirring dust that had lain for centuries, each particle a memory of conflict, endurance, and devotion. Priests knelt in sanctified halls now broken, reciting rituals that had lost their words and their weight. The first Titan rested in orbit, colossal and eternal, its sensors dimmed, yet its presence imprinted upon every living and inert thing. Across the heavens, stars blinked weakly through the vacuum, indifferent witnesses. And in that quiet, a question lingered. When all has been observed, measured, and recorded, what remains sacred, and who, if anyone, will remember the meaning of what has been lost? On worlds stripped bare by time and war, monuments to fallen heroes stood jagged and broken. Banners of allegiance, once vibrant, now hung tattered in the windless void. Soldiers traced the lines of ruins with trembling hands, recalling moments of courage, doubt, and fear. Priests whispered fragments of prayers, their voices shaking as though each word might vanish like smoke. The first Titan stood upon a high plateau, colossal and still, its shadow long and unbroken over the fractured land. Dust settled over shattered cathedrals, across the hollowed faces of statues, and among the debris of lives once dedicated to purpose. The galaxy exhaled as if exhausted from its own history, and in the empty corridors of memory, a single fragile thought floated. What is the price of endurance, and is survival without comprehension a gift or a curse? In the silent void, fleets drifted as spectral reminders of battles fought and lost. Hulls floated in the black, corridors empty, consoles blinking faintly with residual memory. Soldiers walked decks, their fingers tracing the metal that had carried them through war, while priests recited psalms whose cadence had long lost meaning. The first Titan hovered above the wreckage, colossal, eternal, watching in silence, its sensors still recording even in stillness. Stars reflected dimly on shattered glass and scorched metal, bearing witness to the quiet end of conflict. Across the debris, dust moved like drifting specters, carrying fragments of memory from one world to another. And as the galaxy paused, the question lingered, unanswered. When all wars are ended and all prayers unheard, what becomes of faith and of those who endured it? Amid shattered ruins of spaceborne shrines, relics glimmered faintly in ghostlight. Soldiers knelt, their eyes hollow, touching symbols whose meaning had long been lost, seeking comfort in gestures now empty. Priests whispered their final confessions into the silence, aware that no god would answer. The first Titan remained still, monumental, a silent witness to the toll of eternity. Dust settled over shattered relics, over floors etched with the footprints of generations. Windows once vibrant with light now captured only the pale reflection of stars in decay. The universe itself seemed to bow in stillness, exhausted from judgment and revelation. And in the quiet, a single thought arose. When the weight of all knowledge and all war falls upon the soul, can any meaning survive, or does silence become the only answer? Across blasted cities and shattered plains, veterans wandered among fragments of hope and ruin alike. The air smelled of ash and memory. Flags hung broken from poles, and shattered statues reflected the fading light of distant suns. Soldiers bowed heads over relics and weapons, their hands tracing the faces of comrades lost and choices forced. Priests whispered prayers into air that carried no answer, their chants swallowed by the vacuum of silence. The first Titan loomed, motionless, eternal, recording everything in meticulous quiet. Across the horizon, the last light of dying stars painted ruins with shades of sorrow and remembrance. And in the faint murmur of wind through fractured structures, the galaxy seemed to ask itself, when all devotion, sacrifice, and loyalty have been measured, what meaning remains for those who bear witness alone? In the twilight of collapsed empires, ships drifted like ghosts over the cold glow of planets long dead. Soldiers moved among wreckage as shadows of what had once been, their eyes tracing the curves of broken machinery and fallen banners. Priests whispered into altars whose stones had cooled centuries before, seeking words that might answer questions no god would hear. Dust settled across corridors and streets, upon the weapons of the faithful and the dead alike. The first Titan rested silently among the ruins, its sensors dim, yet recording every echo, every memory, every act of devotion and despair. And as the galaxy exhaled, fading into timeless silence, one final thought lingered across space. What is the cost of endurance, and does the universe remember those who bear its weight? Stand witness and honor the echoes. Like, subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts in the comments.